Why is it that as your birthday approaches, you don't feel more excited, but instead become quieter, more restrained, more low-key? Not because you don't value yourself, not because you truly dislike rituals or celebration, but because something subtle has shifted. You stop wanting people to know. You stop reminding anyone. You stop lifting this day to a level where it needs to be acknowledged. Why do you slowly realize that your birthday no longer feels like a day that truly belongs to you? It's not that no one remembers, and it's not that you receive no wishes at all. But when you imagine the thought, what if no one really thinks of me today? You're not surprised. Instead, there's a familiar calm. And why? Even though you still want to be remembered, still want to be taken seriously, do you find yourself speaking up less and even resisting celebration? You instinctively decline invitations. You reply politely to birthday messages, then quietly close the conversation. When someone genuinely prepares something for you, you feel uncomfortable. Sometimes even the urge to retreat, not because you're dramatic, and not because you're ungrateful, but because your body remembers something important. Attention doesn't always feel safe. Attention can create expectation. Expectation can expose need. And need in the past often led to disappointment. So over time, you learned a safer way. Instead of letting others decide how meaningful your birthday should be, you quietly learned to place it back among ordinary days. If any of this feels familiar, then today we're not asking whether you've become too cold or what you might be avoiding. We're asking a gentler and more honest question. What happens psychologically when someone begins treating their birthday like just another day? How does this quiet shift take shape, step by step? And how does it subtly reshape your relationship with expectation, with being seen, and with the question, am I someone who deserves to be celebrated? For most people, treating their birthday like an ordinary day is not a sudden decision. There was no moment where you announced, from now on, this doesn't matter. It changed quietly, through repetition. You stopped mentioning it ahead of time. You stopped hinting that the day mattered. You filled your schedule on purpose. Work, tasks, obligations, not because you were busy, but because busyness leaves no room for expectation to surface. Outwardly, you sound composed. I don't really celebrate birthdays. I'm past that stage. It's just a date. It sounds mature, grounded, even admirable. But internally, something else happened. You stopped allowing yourself to expect. Not because you don't want to be valued, but because you know the quiet drop of disappointment too well. That moment when your phone lights up and it's not the person you hoped for. When the day ends and nothing really happened. It doesn't shatter you, but it leaves a clear conclusion. This isn't something I can assume, so you adapt. Instead of hoping, you lower the bar. Instead of caring openly, you soften the meaning. Instead of risking that small fall, you preemptively step back. You didn't become cold. You learned how to place your heart where it would hurt less. Psychologically, people don't change after one disappointment. They change after patterns. Birthdays are uniquely vulnerable because they're not about achievement. They're about existence. They carry a quiet message to the nervous system. Today, I matter simply because I exist. That's why disappointment hits harder here than on any other day. It's not about gifts or parties. It's about absence. The person you thought would remember didn't. The attention you assumed would appear never came. After this happens enough times, the brain does something very rational. It lowers the emotional volume. This isn't pessimism, it's emotional self-protection. If excitement often leads to pain, stability becomes the safer choice. So you tell yourself, birthdays aren't a big deal. I don't like attention anyway. Keeping it simple feels better. These sound like beliefs, but at a deeper level, they're shields. When you expect nothing, you don't have to process loss. When the day is small, it can't disappoint you. You're not indifferent. You're protecting yourself. Adult relationships are uncertain. People are busy. Attention is scattered. Emotional responses aren't guaranteed. In this environment, treating your birthday like any other day becomes a highly controlled choice. There's nothing to wait for, No phone checking, no moment of realization that nothing happened. You remove uncertainty, and with it, the drop. Psychologically, this is about reclaiming agency. When you don't assign meaning to others, their responses lose power over your emotional state. You decide whether to rest, whether to eat well, whether to be alone or not. That sense of control is real and effective, but it comes with a subtle cost. Over time, you get used to not being highlighted, not being surprised, not being actively chosen. When someone does try, you may feel awkward instead of joyful, guilty instead of open. Not because you don't want care, but because you haven't stood in the position of being celebrated for a long time. You didn't reject joy. You chose the version of life that felt safest to continue. Avoiding disappointment brings a kind of peace. When you stop expecting, you stop bracing for missed messages. You stop replaying moments in your head at night, wondering whether someone forgot you or whether you mattered less than you hoped. Life becomes steadier, more predictable, less emotionally reactive. And for many people, this feels like growth. You become calmer, more self-contained, less easily shaken by other people's attention or lack of it. But psychology points to a quieter truth beneath this stability. Emotional defenses don't only block pain, they also reshape how joy is allowed to appear. When you lower expectations, you don't just protect yourself from disappointment, you also reduce the emotional range you're willing to enter. Excitement becomes something you evaluate first. Surprise becomes something you approach carefully. Joy becomes conditional, not because you don't want it, but because you've learned to ask, even unconsciously, will this end well? Will this cost me something later? Is it safer not to feel too much? So, happiness becomes quieter, more contained, less spontaneous. You still feel good things, but they arrive muted, filtered through caution. This doesn't mean you're unhappy. It means your nervous system has learned that stability is more valuable than intensity. And that trade-off makes sense, especially if past intensity often led to emotional fallout. But it also explains something subtle. Why moments that could feel celebratory sometimes feel oddly flat, not empty, just restrained. Your joy isn't gone. It has learned to walk softly. People often misunderstand this part. They assume that if you treat your birthday like an ordinary day, you must not need recognition. That attention makes you uncomfortable, that being noticed isn't important to you. But for many people, the truth is almost the opposite. You don't need less attention. You just don't want partial attention. Being half-remembered hurts more than not expecting anything at all. A message that feels obligatory, a late acknowledgement, a celebration that happens only because you reminded someone. These moments don't soothe the nervous system. They strain it. So instead of putting yourself in a position where your importance might be measured, you quietly remove the test altogether. You don't ask, you don't hint, you don't wait. From a psychological perspective, this is a form of avoidant emotional regulation, not because you're distant, but because experience taught you that disappointment is easier to prevent than to process. And yet, something important remains true. You still notice. You notice who reaches out without prompting, who remembers details, who makes the effort when there's no reminder, no signal. You may say it doesn't matter, but your body responds differently to sincerity than to obligation. You never stopped wanting connection. You just want it to be real, not negotiated, not extracted, not uneven. You don't want to be acknowledged because it's your birthday. You want to be remembered because you mattered. True maturity is often misunderstood. It's not about erasing needs. It's not about becoming emotionally self-sufficient to the point of numbness, and it's not about pretending you don't care. Real maturity is discernment. It's realizing that having needs is human, but exposing them without safety is optional. You stop offering your emotional vulnerability to uncertain environments. You stop asking people who are inconsistent to handle something tender, but you don't disappear completely. Instead, you become selective. You choose quiet birthdays, not out of bitterness, but out of self-knowledge. You decide when to open and when to stay contained. And sometimes you may choose differently. One year, you might light a candle for yourself, not for attention, not for validation, but to acknowledge something quietly important. I made it through this year. I grew. I stayed present. That choice isn't regression, it's agency. You're no longer forced into celebration, nor forced into withdrawal. You're allowed to decide how closeness enters your life, who gets access, what feels safe, when it's worth softening again. That's not emotional distance, that's emotional authority. If one year your birthday passes quietly, no plans, no announcement, barely a moment of pause, don't rush to judge yourself. It may not be detachment, it may be self-alignment. You learn to ground yourself without external noise, to regulate emotion without spectacle. That's growth. And still, you're allowed to want to be remembered. Independence and longing can coexist. You don't have to choose between "I don't care" and "I still hope." Both can be true, because birthdays were never about age. They mark presence. You're still here, still learning, still becoming. And that, quiet or not, is worth gentle acknowledgement. This is Felix. May you understand yourself more deeply and treat the growing version of you with kindness. See you next time.